Like all revolutions, tyrants are often replaced by a temporary democratic coalition, like the Kerensky regime during the Russian Revolution. But that could give way to the most radical of factions, like the Bolsheviks or the Jacobins. Our island had been ruled by men who thought they held the future, only to be dragged backward by the ghosts of the past. Salt Spring has always meant to be free, until freedom meant something new, something darker. One tyrant fell, another arose, and when the people finally stood against them, they found themselves trapped in a cycle as old as civilization itself. But in the quiet moments, in the space between rebellion and rule, one question remained. Was this to be their fate, or had they simply wandered too far into the Twilight Zone? At first, Salt Spring was free, truly free. After Topp Dollah's fall, the people built a democratic coalition, a government of balance where farmers, brewers, healers, and traders all had a voice. Decisions were debated under open skies. Compromises struck with the trust of neighbors. But revolutions are seldom satisfied with their first draft, and this one was no different. The coalition was temporary. Indecision, infighting, and the slow erosion of unity made it weak, and in weakness, opportunity lurked. That's when Slow John stepped in. He wasn't the loudest, nor the fiercest, but he was patient, deliberate, a man who watched, waited, and took only the shots worth taking. While others squabbled over details, he spoke in simple truths. We need order. We need strength. We need someone who knows how to keep this island safe. And somehow the people agreed. He rose not through violence, but through exhaustion. Their frustration with endless debate made his promises sound like salvation. First a few protections, then a few decrees, then enforcement. Before long, Slow John was the island's new ruler, and his grip was tighter than Topp Dollah's had ever been. The people had thrown off one tyrant only to welcome another under the guise of stability. And now they wondered, had they fought for freedom only to lose it again? Slow John's strength, though brutal, was built on the illusion of stability. But when the enforcers, those who once carried out his orders, realized they were just another set of shackled servants, their rebellion shattered what remained of his rule. Salt Spring, in its moment of supposed liberation, fell into chaos, and in chaos, new force always rises. That force was Gnap, the Island Emperor. Unlike his predecessors, Gnap did not pretend to be a man of the people. He knew power was the only truth, that stability came not from fairness, but from absolute control. He militarized the island, turned its resources into weapons, forged alliances with smugglers and exiles. Within months, Salt Spring was no longer just defiant territory. It was an empire, one with ambitions beyond its shores. The Gulf Islands, peaceful in their isolation, were now in the crosshairs of conquest. The people had once fought for freedom, now found themselves marching under Gnap's banner, caught in a cycle where tyranny never truly dies. It only changes names. Resistance was scattered, weak, and tired of fighting, but it wasn't gone. Somewhere in the dense forests, along the rocky shores, beneath the watchful eyes of Gnap's soldiers, a new movement was forming. This wasn't a revolution of naive dreamers or idealists. They were the survivors, the ones who had lived through Topp Dollah, Slow John, and now Gnap, and knew that each ruler was worse than the last. They had no illusions of democracy anymore. They understood power, and now they would wield it for themselves. The Gulf Islands, once passive and untouched, began to push back. Secret militias formed in Maine, Galliano, and Pender. Smugglers turned their ships into supply lines for the rebels. Saboteurs targeted the factories, the docks, the very foundation of Gnap's empire. The emperor tightened his grip, issued brutal decrees, crushed opposition where he found it, but cracks were forming. The people knew the land better than the enforcers ever could. They were patient, cunning, waiting for their moment. And when the storm finally broke, when the first island, Maine, fell out of his grasp, it was no mere victory. It was the first strike in a war that would determine the fate of the archipelago. In the ruins of Gnap's war machine, as Salt Spring clawed at the edges of the Gulf Islands, a new faction emerged. Not from the wreckage of tyranny, but from a philosophy as ancient as the earth itself. They called themselves the Green League, though their enemies had far darker names for them. Unlike the power-hungry despots before them, the League didn't seek wealth, conquest, or dominion in the traditional sense. No, their revolution was one of purity, a return to the old ways, a rejection of industry, technology, and all forms of modern excess. They burned generators, smashed machines, outlawed the very concept of progress. Metal was stripped from the island, wires ripped from the walls, roads left to crumble as nature reclaimed them. They spoke of balance, harmony, and the sacred simplicity of the past. But behind their poetic words lay a rigid doctrine enforced with a terrifying zeal. Dissenters vanished into the forest, their fate unknown. Those who resisted found themselves exiled, or worse. Yes, Salt Spring had seen many rulers, each one more brutal than the last, but the Green League was different. This wasn't a mere tyranny. This was an attempt to rewrite the very fabric of existence, to erase the modern world and force the people back into the past they never chose. And now, as whispers of rebellion stirred yet again, one question loomed above all others. Was there any escape from this cycle, or was Salt Spring doomed to be ruled by the ghosts of its own making? Well, fair government didn't return in a single battle or declaration. It crept back like the tide, slow and steady, eroding the foundations of the Green League's rule one wave at a time. The League had believed their control was absolute, that their people had been fully broken, bent to their vision of the past. But Salt Spring had seen too many tyrants rise and fall to accept another without resistance. The rebellion against the League wasn't loud. It was quiet, cunning, carried out in whispers and hidden in acts of defiance. Tools were smuggled, knowledge preserved, secret meetings held beneath the cover of darkness. The islanders worked where the League could not see, restoring lost infrastructure, reconnecting with the world beyond their imposed isolation. Slowly, the League's hold weakened. Their rigid doctrines couldn't feed the people, couldn't protect them from the natural dangers of their own environment. One by one, their followers began to drift away, questioning the harsh restrictions they once embraced. And when the final stand came, it wasn't a war, it was a decision. The people simply stopped obeying. They refused to bend, refused to fear. The League, once fierce and unrelenting, crumbled under the weight of its own unsustainable vision. And so the islanders reclaimed their land, not through force, but through endurance. They established a new government, one built on balance, on lessons learned from every ruler who had tried to cage them before. Salt Spring would never again accept tyranny, no matter how it was disguised. The people had rewritten their own story, and this time they would be the ones to hold the pen.